Hey guys, thanks so much for watching this video. Today we are going to review review my budget planner for the month of April, the first week in April. So let's go ahead and get right into it. This should be a fairly quick video, just a few things that I want to highlight. The first thing I want to highlight is as I go through preparing to close out for the week, I need to highlight the final entry that I made, an expense that came out when I went to the Dollar Tree and I got some personal items that fall into the health and beauty category. So I'm going to go ahead and highlight this. So by doing that, that kind of wraps up my expenses. A couple of things I want to point out about this week. This is the first week in quarter two, and I made some pretty big changes in my budget. A couple of the changes that have really made a difference, and I'm loving it so far, is I am officially making my variable transfer deposits into my digital cash envelopes. So that means all of those expenses that I was having in the prior months where I was like running over on pages, they won't really appear on this expense tracker. They'll only appear on my envelope trackers on the left-hand side. I'm loving that. It has made this process so much cleaner and I can understand it better in my mind. So I'm going to try to explain how this works. It's really simple and I talk about it all the time. But it helps me to put it into words because sometimes as I'm doing it in real life, I have to give myself reminders. And you'll see when I go over the preview for next week what I mean by reminders. But it's basically this. I don't use cash pretty much at all. When cash comes into my life, somebody has given me a gift or they've cash apped me something, or I went to a craft fair and I sold some of my genealogy content and something like that, right? But other than that, I don't deal with cash. And so my budget system is a digital cash envelope budget system, meaning I love the cash envelope system as a whole. I love watching people on YouTube do it. I love seeing them count money. I love seeing them move stuff from envelopes. And then beyond that, there are some really good benefits of using a cash envelope. One of them is helping you stay focused on important categories in your life and budget per category. And that's a benefit that can't be, undervalued. So I wanted to replicate that in a digital system. And what I came up with is pretty much what you see here. I get my deposit just like most people do, get your checks deposited into your account. And then when I do my budget, I take a certain portion of that money and I transfer it to a variable savings fund checking account. So that would be the same thing as somebody who did cash envelopes going to the bank and withdrawing those funds. I just don't physically go to the bank and I don't withdraw cash. I withdraw it from my main checking account and I transfer it to a separate checking account, which I call my variable savings checking account. And that's how it's labeled at my bank. Except it doesn't say savings, it's variable expenses checking account. The money that's in there is strictly for my important categories. So for this week, I withdrew $80. And that amount, right, 50, 10, 10, and 10 equals 80. That amount aligns with the amount of money that I put in my cash envelopes. So I've set that aside in that variable expense checking account. When I make my budget, or I do it after I make my budget, but when I look at my budget, I come in here and I determine how much of that money goes into each critical category. For me, for this week, I put $50 in groceries, 10 in personal, 10 transportation, and 10 eating out. That's what I put in those categories. So on my expense tracker, I now only make one transaction, which is that transfer rate of $80 or transfer amount of $80. That's it. I do the same thing with my business income now. Because my business is not self-sufficient. I've said that many times. So I'm still funding a lot of my business out of my personal account. But I wanted to move those expenses out of my personal account system here because there are tax implications and all different type of things that you have to do with your business funds. So I wanted to take it out, but I needed to still track it some way. So I do the same thing now. I make one entry. I don't have it this week. It'll be next week, but I make one entry for business transfer, and it works the same way. So that's how this system works. It's a lot cleaner than it was when I started, and it will continue to improve, but I'm very excited for this first week. So that being said, let's take a look at what expenses I did have per critical category, because this isn't all my categories. Just like in cash envelopes, you don't have an envelope for every single variable expense. You have an envelope for those or most people don't. You have envelopes for those expenses that you really want to kind of keep an eye on, the critical expenses or the ones that you have most frequently, things like that. So I have one for grocery, and I spent, and I'm just adding it up on the calculator here. So I spent $36 out of my $50 budget. So I'm going to come in here and write, I need to take this off. Oh, I need to take that off because that was not going to work. So I'm going to write $36. Now, I was not doing this total in quarter one. I was, but not in this way. I was writing it as I go, and I'll probably still do a little bit of writing as I go, but I round up when I do that, and that's just to kind of keep me on track of what I had. I did not spend anything out of my personal budget, so that was $0. I spent $12.23 out of my transportation budget, so I was over by $2.23. And I had enough left in my variable funds account to cover it because I spent less money in groceries. And then eating out, I was over as well, which is why I ended up spending less in groceries. I spent $19.45. So I was over by $9, which again, I was able to cover because I was shorter on grocery. So I don't like to go over with eating out. That's a pet peeve of mine, but I did for this week. Just had a lot going on. So total, I spent $67.68 out of that $80. Now, what I'm going to do with that amount is I'm just going to leave that in my variable expense account until the end of the month. And anything I have left over at the end of the month, I will transfer that to long-term savings. But that's how that works. That is how it worked for the first week. And I'm excited about it, guys. It felt really good to do things this way because I was able to see more clearly what I was spending per category. I could see the money more clearly. Before, I was doing this in theory, but I wasn't making this variable transfer and writing it down. And writing it down really helped me stay on track a little bit better. Another benefit of this week that revealed itself to me is that I noticed the expenses that I was making, the expenses that I listed on my expense tracker. I was more prone to list an expense in a category that I usually don't use. So what I mean by that, if you've watched any of my earlier videos, I've referred to how I used to just put everything in personal. Like, for example, if I was still listing all my personal expenses over here, I probably would have listed this trip to the Dollar Tree under personal. When in reality, it's health and beauty because I was buying face wash and soap. You know what I mean? So it should have always been under health and beauty. But because I knew when I went to the Dollar Tree that I was making a transaction outside of my category, that it didn't fit in personal. So it really helped me to categorize this the way it should always have been categorized. And that's kind of what I'm saying. And I felt like it was easier to do that with my expenses that I was making out of my main account, because I was effectively using my variable account the way I always should have been. I don't know if that makes sense to you guys, but I found it to be very helpful. So that is what the first week looked like. As I prepare for the second week, what I want to do is just kind of quickly share with you what my budget looks like. I have a lot of bills coming out this second week. So I'm actually excited about that. Some of those bills I'm getting ahead of, which it has taken me months to get ahead on some of my bills. And I'm just really, really excited to be able to do that finally. It was always my plan to start doing that, to build toward doing that in Q2. I didn't hit all my goals, but I hit a couple, and, you know, celebrate the wins, right? So I'm excited for that. My budget for Q2, I have $50 in groceries, nothing personal, nothing entertainment, $30 in transportation. I work from home, but sometimes I have to go down like to our downtown area and go to the office. I have to do that this week, so I have to pay for parking and more gas than normal. And then nothing for eating out. So we will see how that goes for the week, but I have another $80 transfer that I will make at the beginning of the week to cover for the week of April 7th. And then I will probably also make a business transfer at the beginning of the week. So all these bills are scheduled to come out. My meal plan is here. I am going to be eating chili, tacos, and Korean chicken. I have a vacation coming up the end of the week, so I need to make a vacation transfer as well. And my habit tracker, I am still trying to do a no spend on planner supplies. We will see how that works. I have a little personal note here. As I am getting into this, it's not a new system, but I'm making some changes. I need to use some sticky notes to remind myself of things I need to do sometimes. So that is there. If I look at my weekly cash flow, everything looks good. I was really lean in April, the first week of April, because I just didn't know how things were going to go, taking a large chunk of my inflow, of my cash flow from my business income, taking a large chunk of that out of my personal budget. I just didn't know what it was going to look like, but it turned out fine. But anyway, so April 7th, I have all this here. And I'll be checking this off as the week goes through. That's it. Let's see. I don't have any special trackers. I haven't started any new vacation travel budgets or anything like that yet. No savings challenges right now. I just wrapped up. If you've been watching my videos, you know I just went on a big trip in March. So I just wrapped up a big savings challenge that lasted basically from January to March. So I'll probably start a few more sometime this month, but right now I don't have anything else to check off. So thank you so much for watching this video. I appreciate your time, and happy planning for the rest of April.